Well, happy Friday afternoon, everybody, from hot, muggy New Hampshire today. It is so hot and muggy here that they actually canceled school. Like, how crazy is that? Like, I think when we were kids, like, barefoot, up the hill, in snow, blindfolded, backwards, naked, all that stuff, right? But apparently when it gets to be, 72 degrees, they cancel school. Well, yeah, I mean, it got to I think it's 86 right now, but yeah, they canceled school. So wonderful week here. Very excited to have our good friend John. I'm still probably going to screw it up and call Sasleo, but it is Avic SaaS Management. And so without further ado, let's just go round robin here. I'm Tim Golden, founder of Compliance Risk. We have Dr. Jesse, Mr. Mustache, Mr. Farmer himself. Jesse, say hello.
Hey everyone, glad to be here. It was 45 this morning in Minnesota, so I'm enjoying the heat has passed. You're dealing with it now, and it's nice and cool. I get to wear my flannels.
Awesome.
I have a little bit of a mess going on here. We're painting, so don't mind my background.
No, you're bright white, like it's blinding me or something. Like I don't even need to have my ring light on because it just glares right back at me. So
it matches my aura better, pure as the driven snow.
And honestly, the bed with the pillows, if I move over this way a little bit, you can see the unmade dog bed over there. But yeah, so right there with you, my friend. I'm not in my normal spot because I still have the back problems. But without further ado, our co-host, our partner in crime, Mr. Tim.
Hey, what's going on? Tim, a little bit of side noise, but excited about this topic this week. John and I met first panel conference I ever went. I saw John present, and I was like, "Wow, this guy's got it." I mean, charisma, right? He's got a great new product, which we won't name because there's a new name now, Polar Bear, right? So, really excited to talk about Shadow IT. What the heck is it, right? What how do I prevent it? What are some of the things I can do to monitor it? We can talk a little bit about policy and people and procedures, maybe, Tim, right? So, I'm excited about this topic. And John,
speaking of shadow, what the heck is this on your chin and on your chin? Speaking of shadow, it's 2 o'clock shadow on a Friday? I mean, need a little milk and the kitty cat to come lick that off or what? Anyways, without further ado, our good friend, John Harden. Thank you so much, John. Say hello from Avic SaaS Management.
Hey there, John Harden. Thanks for having me here, Tim. I didn't realize you're going to be offended now, Tim. I was up in New Hampshire last week and did not stop by and say hi. I never knew you were in New Hampshire. So this is news.
Really?
Yeah, I was up in on Lake Sunapee.
That's on the other side of the state, but that's okay. We still like them.
Yeah, it's just less humid there. That's all.
Something
like that. But yeah, my name's John Harden here, Senior Product Marketing Manager over at Avic. I represent our new line of offering called Avic SaaS Management, which is really about shadow IT management. And it's a big reason why I'm here today to have a conversation. I spent about 10 years in an MSP working my way up from the NOC, a help desk, all the way up into upper management at my old MSP. Until to launch Sasleo, a business to solve this problem, which is now under the Avic umbrella, under Avic SaaS Management after its acquisition last November. So very happy to talk about this topic. And as Tim know, I could talk for hours on this. So,
and we're so glad to have you. And I got to say, what's with the football helmet and why is it not a Patriots logo on there? All right, you're out. All right, you're out.
Brutal. Any other helmet. But
we should mention the Friday drinking game. So every time John's video freezes, take a drink.
Yeah,
I got my coffee here, right? So you know me, I always got my Yeti with me. So it's not my branded one. Maybe I should get a branded one. But yeah, so let's come out of the shadows and jump into the light and figure out what is this thing called shadow IT. I mean, all right, who went to Urban Dictionary?
Right now. It's a funny explanation, right?
So what was Urban Dictionary? What did it have to say?
It says shadow IT, someone who will guard your back as long as they can and has a lot of life experience. I don't think that's a government employee whose job is not viewed to be viewed particularly important by most of the people who don't work for the government. Nope, don't think it's that one.
Nope.
There's got to be a dozen Urban Dictionary definitions of shadow IT. So
that's funny. So John, tell us, what is your definition? What is Avik SaaS?
A friend who follows you around while shopping.
Oh, I like that one. Isn't that me? Wait a minute. Say that one more time, Tim.
A friend who follows you around while shopping.
That would be me when I go out with my wife and daughters just about anywhere. I'm the one pony dog and shadowing behind them.
Survey says.
All right, so let's actually go to the professional who's been in this space and tell us, John, what is your definition of shadow IT?
Yeah, my definition is just right out of the book, right? Nothing fancy, nothing special. I mean, shadow IT is truly just IT or technology that employees adopt outside of the purview of the IT leadership or the IT compliance management group. And fundamentally, shadow IT can be anything, right? Shadow IT, it could literally be this mouse. Like I bought this mouse on Amazon. It's not sanctioned IT. It's just a mouse that I bought online and doesn't have an asset tag. So my IT manager probably doesn't care about it. But fundamentally, it's shadow IT. It's IT that I'm using to do my job that my IT manager doesn't know about. Where I care and where I focus in is really on that SaaS shadow IT, which is really where the majority of risky shadow IT kind of lays. It's in that software application shadow IT. And yeah, go ahead, Tim. I think you got a question out of there.
No, I was going to say, so like my little USB drive that's unlabeled. Oh, wait, now it just broke my own CUI rule, my own data labeling rule. This could be considered shadow IT. But that's not what we're talking about today. No. We're talking about something far easier that end users can get their hands on.
Yep.
And more widespread than running to Amazon or Best Buy.
Yeah. And that's that SaaS shadow IT. Fundamentally, this is, I introduced myself. I spent 10, 12 years in the MSP world prior to launching a business to solve this problem. But fundamentally, employees tend to choose the path of least resistance. I say it's like water in a stream. And if IT is a blocker in that stream, the employee wants to get their job done, they typically just circumnavigate what IT's rules or policies. I know, is that a drinking word there too for you, Tim? To enforce shadow IT. And fundamentally, there's no malintent in most cases of shadow IT either. It's just somebody trying to get their job done. So we just want to bring visibility into it here. That's why I exist, is to bring visibility into the problem, but why we exist here at Avik to bring visibility into the individual issues. So excited to talk about it.
Yeah. So, as I think about this, right, so it is very easy for me to run over to, I don't know, ClickUp or Miro or Gmail or Facebook or any of those kinds of things, right? When we talk about those SaaS platforms, I mean, it's literally 2 clicks and I'm in, especially now when they make it even more easy or easier or more betterer or much more, whatever. They make it easier for like, click here to log in with Microsoft. Click here to create your account with Google. So from an IT management perspective, from a MSP perspective, clients running around, grabbing all this stuff. What happened to us and one of our clients was, as I dug into their business, as I started to understand and have those technical and business conversations with their sales team, for example, and I started talking to this salesperson and that salesperson, doing my one-on-ones, 10 or 15 minutes with each of them, and then bringing them all together in the same room, realizing they had 4 different CRMs, which meant they had 4 different data sets because each one of them had their favorite tool. That's a problem, right? So from a lot of different reasons, but that's a problem. And it happens everywhere.
Yeah.
What about I don't want to do my job, or I don't want to write my my kid's paper? A little open AI, a little chat GBT, right? So I mean, like, seems like we got a new shadow IT in town. So
Chat,
yeah,
that one's the winner.
and you're covering mostly SaaS, right? Software as a service, cloud-based. But there's also, right, like downloading, Python libraries and things like that, or like when you think about vulnerabilities, like a lot of them are tied to open source things like Python. So how far do you go into, is it mostly on the cloud side, or do you kind of cover the full gamut of everything that's and we'll get into this as well, like allow list, wait list, not allow list, right? Like, where does that sanctioned, unsanctioned, as you said? So
yeah, you say chat. I'll give you a stat, by the way, on ChatGPT. I had a contribution actually to CPO magazine on this one. So we analyzed the data. About 8% of users are using ChatGPT. So 8% of the workforce has tried it or used it to solve a business problem. And so I don't know. I just think that's an overwhelming stat. No other SaaS company has had that explosive of a growth. But fundamentally,
I have a point on that, right? So one of the biggest downloads on my website is acceptable use policy for AI. Like, I can't tell you how, like, I didn't even think much about it as a lead or whatever. I was like, hey, this is here. We probably need to have something to help us understand how to govern around it. So I wrote a little article, threw it out there, and I'm like, I'm getting a lot of visitors to that. Like, the amount of people that are searching for AI related tools, AI related policies and procedures, and SaaS management, right? It's crazy, right? And so it's just interesting, like you said, like if you think of 8% of the workforce, well, how big is the workforce? That's pretty large. That's like millions and millions of people like Googling away on their chat things and probably dumping corporate data like they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah, John, how much is that sanctioned, right? That 8%. And what are you guys doing, I guess? Like, what are you looking at Baird and, well, I guess all the different flavors as well, right? Because most of the time from a work situation, like, it's probably not okay, right? Unless you have really defined ground rules on it. Like, what are you using ChatGPT for? So
yeah. And what we find is, I mean, most people are probably just going to poke away and play at it. Like, they jump in, they've heard it in the news, they want to look at it, and that's the start and the stop of their AI exploration. But I think it's kind of funny, right? For the longest time, it didn't even have a sign in with Microsoft until the acquisition. Like, all you could do is sign with Google or sign up via web form. So even if you wanted to use an IDP, you could do that.
yeah.
And I would say, Tim, you've asked this, I'll answer it. Where do we start and stop? We're about business apps. We got about 125,000 apps in our repository of what we see. And it's just growing. But I think there's something important there. SaaS isn't the start and the stop of shadow IT. Business applications is another area that's really, really critical when it comes down to it. Because, Tim, you hit the holy grail of shadow IT, by the way. Productivity suites, file sharing tools, communication tools. That's kind of the trinity of shadow IT. People, solving their own problems there. But when it boils down to it, any business app can hold business data. Like, why is an online banking portal worse shadow IT or better shadow IT than Miro? And why is, tracking my issues in a Trello board where I can upload customer lists any less important than an industry council forum that I'm part of? So shadow IT comes in lots of flavors and forms. And there's just so many web apps out there these days, and all of them have business data in it normally.
Yeah. Speaking of that, a question I wanted to ask you is, typically, you mentioned this, is shadow IT materializes because business processes are impeded and users find a better or an easier way to work, right? They're like water or attackers. They flow to the area of least resistance. So having worked in an MSP, you know that we kind of accept that's how it is. Oh, HR uses Citrix file share because they've just done it that way, and it's not really the rest of the business, but we know that they use it. How do we, or what would you say are the steps you can take to start getting a hold on shadow IT, and where's the line to bring it into the fold as part of the entrenched business process because people are using it? And how do you balance that against being the department of no and saying like, aha, we caught you, you can't use that even though it's easier? How do you strike a balance there?
Yeah, so there's two ways, by the way, shadow IT gets in. The number one is the one you mentioned, right? Path of least resistance, trying to do their job and make it easy. The second's an education gap. Oh, I thought we were going to get a good fun freeze there. Second's the education gap. It's because I go to solve a business problem, but I didn't know my business actually had a technology to solve it. Those are the two flavors of shadow IT I see time and time again. But to help Jesse answer your question directly on the Citrix file share scenario, right? Like shadow IT is really just shadow IT until it's not, to be fair, right? Like shadow IT is just IT that's not known by the IT team. It's not intrinsically good. It's not intrinsically bad. It doesn't, have intent. It just is. And so, I always like to recommend following word for word, at least in the MSP space, what the CIS framework is going to say about it, right? 2.3 is talking about addressing unauthorized software. And where they talk about it is reviewing monthly. And that's what I actually recommend with managed service providers is you're doing a quarterly, hopefully you're doing your quarterly business reviews or some level of interval review with your client. And bringing shadow IT to that conversation is a really strategic lens to talk about it with. We recommend traditionally here, however you get it, I don't really care what tool you use to get to the shadow IT, but like when you get that list and you're talking to your customer about it, asking not is it approved or is it a bad or anything like that, just asking a really easy question to the customer, what business problem is this technology solving? Not is it approved or not, but like what business problem? And you'll get all the other questions you need. So from a shadow IT perspective with Citrix file share is the one that the finance wants to use, bring it into a managed compliant inventory, assign a business owner and stakeholder, assign the information to keep it compliant, but review new things that are emerging on a recurring interval.
Yeah, I think that's an important topic too, Jesse, because you were just talking about this, like I caught you in the know, like I'm Dr. No, right? Like, right. It's interesting because obviously we're talking mostly MSPs who are in the channel, right? And they're dealing with small businesses. When enterprise IT uses these tools, they're like, shut it all down, right?
Right. And so,
and then there's like, anything else, like, no, you're not allowed to use it. And I like the way you're going about it, right? Because it's like these things are coming because they're solving some kind of business problem that just trickles down.
Right.
And it's a little more dangerous, obviously, but obviously you're finding out tools that are making the business that are serving a business purpose, right? So it's like, it's great. And like an MSP can't be that Dr. No, or else that they're not going to be the MSP any longer. Right?
Yeah, right. And Keith, our good friend, Dr. Keith Nelson over there makes a really good point. Like making sure that we're part of the business and not the police, right? And I think that's what you were kind of alluding to there, Tim.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Well,
Jesse, sorry.
No, I just had a follow on, and again, want to dig in on this a little bit because I agree with all of what you're saying. I think we should, what's the word? We should fail open, right? So if we can, we should want to adopt a better way of doing things. And so you have to have a reason to say no rather than just no, like the Amazon rule. But just give you a quick example because it's fresh in my mind. An MSP I'm working with on building their vCISO program took on a 10-person SaaS company for a vCISO engagement. And we got the the application list, and it's 50 plus different applications, and I can see duplication within that list, right? So I think what you had mentioned, I think, is an important piece, is having a standard application and business process workflow vetting and documentation process, and that helps us identify those things early and often. Like, why do we want to use this? But again, making it easy. So just a quick interjection there. Maybe you have some thoughts.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that as well, right? So when I first took a job at the company that I was at, or that I am at, sorry, for the first several years, I was known as the no guy. I was known as the big bad Tim, right? I was known as the we can't do it, Tim won't let us. And where I failed in that was not taking the time to explain the why, right? Not taking the time to help the people that are just trying to do their job understand this is why we're removing admin rights. This is why we're blocking these websites. But yeah, from an enterprise perspective, as the CTO, CIO, like, quote, quote, had the authority to basically say, nope. And I went about it the wrong way. I went about it as, nope, turning stuff off. Oh, and the lesson learned here for MSPs is working with your client, understanding their business. And it may actually be a better tool than what they have in the long run. Like, staff know what they need to do their job. They collaborate with peers and like-minded individuals and they might actually find a better tool to do that work. And so try not to be the yes person, but as Keith said, and as Jesse said, be that true business partner.
Yeah, Tim, that's why I was kind of like, don't be the referee.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That means windmill dunk is legal.
And so, can I add one thing to Jesse's statement earlier there? Where he was
yeah. Hold on. Let's do this right, because I'm trying to make sure that we are doing this right.
You mentioned Jesse early and often. And I think that's the key there, right? Like, if you talk about a business, a 10-person company that has 50 SaaS tools, if you multiply that business by 10 more folks, it's going to probably, it's so close. Trust me, they'll be better. It'll be like a 30-second freeze, and I'll be looking crazy. So, but when you get it early and often, I often find this in SaaS companies too. They adopt a lot of SaaS because that's just the way of their beast. That's the way they run.
Right.
But when you can talk to them about, the new intern who brought Airtable to the conversation, and you're not the no police by asking what business problem is this intern solving. You'll often find they kind of like work themselves into their own solutions by keeping that open-minded approach. But it is about early and often. I think that's where the risks really start to emerge. I was working with a partner who was talking to their client and was running and looking at their shadow IT. And they had found that in the intake process of this medical facility, like 6 or 7 really smart intake people found out that you could do automations in Airtable. And all of a sudden, intake was going through Airtable. And every patient record is getting into Airtable.
That's not a problem.
No, it's no problem. Well, you know how much it cost? $80,000 to upgrade to the enterprise version of Airtable. And now it's not a problem. But those are the things where early and often, if you're an MSP and you caught that behavior when Airtable came out at the beginning and gone to the customer and said, hey, what business problem solving here? You'd have probably found that there was I guarantee there's a solution in their EHR, their PHR software to handle intake. So just about early and often and asking business questions on it.
You asked and said a very important question as I get echo from my phone because I'm trying to simulcast everywhere and follow Facebook everywhere. So hold on. Okay. The key questions as MSPs we should be asking is, what business problem are you trying to solve? That's it. That's all. That's the only question you should be asking. Hey, we love the fact that you're using Airtable or Hootsuite or CRM-A, CRM-B. Like, what is the business problem that the thing you may have isn't solving for? And how do we solve for that? Ooh, there's the freeze.
Just as you were talking, Tim, I had another question for John, and I'd like maybe just get some pragmatic application that he's seen from other partners of his, right? Again, the old question is, this is another service that I have to buy and another service that I have to pitch to my clients. How are partners packaging this? How are they paying for it? And how are they making money off of it?
Yes.
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah. So
Wait. No, I want to hear this response all alone. So we never really get into the package and pricing and how do we sell it. So John, it's all you, my friend.
Yeah. So fundamentally, I firmly believe that SaaS management is a table stake of the MSP of the future. We can't just continue to allow clients to adopt SaaS at breakneck speeds without doing any level of compliance or control management of it. So fundamentally, what we are seeing is the folks that want to adopt a SaaS management practice tend to make this just akin to their RMM or just akin to their other tools that deliver in their full stack. Because most MSPs probably already have it in their contract agreement. They just haven't updated their MSAs in a long time that say we do software management. They just haven't kept up with the time that the software is now in the cloud. So for MSPs, it's actually not as daunting as you might think. Maintaining that compliant list, you don't go into your RMM and facilitate a list constantly to maintain that compliant inventory of what's on the devices. Just like you don't go into a SaaS management tool to build that list of SaaS management offering. The only thing is now you have the data like you're accustomed to. So when somebody calls in and says, I have an issue with Airtable, you have data to go support where to go look at it. So for MSPs in general, it's just part of that core packaging. It's not a passed on, it's not an additional line item, because fundamentally you need to build your practice to a degree around supporting things like employee onboard and offboard cycles and SaaS management. You need to support all the different support tech questions that are coming into your help desk around SaaS products. You kind of just need this data to support your customers in today's world. So packaging and pricing, it's just built into the model per user. I see a lot of MSPs moving per user, and it's just built into that model. And then what the deliverables really boil down to is just working through the shadow IT list on that recurring basis to maintain that CIS 2.3. And working with the customer to wrangle that whole portfolio under it. Yeah. It's not as daunting as it sounds. It really isn't.
Yeah, so absolutely. And just one last thing, Tim, and let's move on. Absolutely, I think you're right in that it's needed and that they should be adopting it. I want to go back to my SaaS company, because if I have to manage 50 applications and I'm charging a per user price, I think maybe a fixed fee bundle, like up to 10 SaaS applications, 10 to 25, and then per user on top of that might be the best way to build that package.
I see where the things where your inputs come from. Yeah, SaaS management of 50 apps doesn't actually really mean that SaaS management's a term that big enterprise industry. It's been around for like 8 years, and it's making its way into the MSP. But MSPs use it different than the enterprise uses it.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. If it's an enterprise using SaaS management, they're going to have everything in that SaaS management tool. MSPs doing SaaS management is something completely different. An MSP doing SaaS management means you're maintaining a compliant inventory of their list of SaaS. You're working with them on a strategic interval about it, or you're owning a handful of key assets for like employee onboard and offboard journeys. But managing it, you're not in there managing the data. You're not in there making sure that it's configured correctly. You're really only there extending the employee life cycle for management and then the compliance management of it. Yeah. Now, there are, of course, deeper hooks you can claw, right? You can consult, you can recommend, you can do implementation. There's a lot deeper hooks, but it's more about maintaining that inventory. Just like, again, I think I always use an RMM as an example. Like, you offer software inventory management, but that's a passive process that your technology is doing because it's part of your bundle.
Yeah, and I guess
I talked to John early on with Staslio, and I was like, talk to me about, and we're getting to it, the MSP, how are they using these insights, right, and this visibility to have that, and what does it do at a QBR? And I thought that was really interesting when you told me. I'm like, yeah, the list is going to be 50. There's going to be tons of SaaS, but let's just have a conversation on the top 5 uses. There's his long cruise. And you'll be amazed at those conversations just talking about those 5 top use those 5 top use applications, SaaS applications, on where it leads to, right? Like, oh, maybe we don't need this on-prem server anymore. Maybe we don't, there's just things that kind of it just opens up things in those QBRs. So I thought that was really interesting. I was like, originally when I heard about it, I'm like, this is a really sophisticated platform. Yeah. But I was like, oh, well, if you just kind of talk about, you can go as deep as you want. You don't necessarily have to go deep. And there's a great value use case just by talking about, let's talk about the top 5 things that your employees are doing on a day-to-day basis, and just the visibility in that. So, yeah.
I think just one thing to think about for MSPs, right, as they get into this, and I think John's right that if you're just doing the asset management portion of the SaaS from an IT perspective, right, you can be pretty cut and dry. So thinking about how you're structuring your contract, and I think where my question comes in is from a security perspective, right? I'm helping these MSPs build security programs, build compliance programs, and all of a sudden when you're going for a SOC 2 and those 50 apps are now in scope, it becomes a much bigger lift. So I just think considering that and saying, is this security spend or is this the IT spend, and how are we packaging and bucketing for that is something to consider as you go through this exercise.
Yeah, 100%. And I think whether they were in scope or not, the challenge there might be that they're still in use and they might have critical business data.
Right? That's the thing. Exactly. Now you're all of a sudden enmeshed in it, and you got to deal with it. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, John, you said my favorite word at least a half a dozen times: compliant, right? So, and I'm not going to go down too much of the compliant path, but what I want to talk a little bit about, and Tim mentioned this earlier, is allowing and disallowing, right? Or, sanctioned or not, like that whole concept of, Jesse, you have 50 apps, or that client has 50 apps, SaaS pieces, like, do they even have a defined software list that says, this is the baseline security. Yeah. This is our baseline documentation that says, this is where we start, right? For us and our MSPs, it's latest version of Windows, MDR, EDR, SIEM product, a browser, and Acrobat. And that's it. Anything beyond that is not on our approved list. And we have that documented. We have that as part of the acceptable use policy. We have that as part of how we deal with stuff so that it isn't the Wild West. Now, not every MSP is like that, and not every end client is like that, especially when you're looking at the micro businesses of 2 to 3 people in a company. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, and I love the kind of aphorism that says security is a function of quality. And so what you'd always caution against as when you're writing policies is you never want to write a policy that immediately puts you outside of compliance with it. And so if you're manually gathering software lists and you have your approved list of software and there's an error there, you're all of a sudden outside of compliance with your own policy. And that's where I think, to John's point, you get a huge benefit from having a dynamically updated and true list that you can depend on it as a source of truth, and is not a configuration error that causes those types of issues in an audit or other purpose.
And let's face it, as an MSP, and we look at the RMM tools that are available, we're going to get the software that's on the end device, but we're not going to know anything about the SaaS stuff, right? We're not, and that's where, something like Audit comes in to be able to help all that other non-installed things on the computer.
From a high level, John, talk a little bit about how you're gathering that data. Is it IP traffic? Like, what are you looking at from a high level? You don't have to give away any secret sauce, but
no, I mean it's all out there. It's all in our KB. There's nothing too secret here, right?
What?
And Tim, by the way, I want to give you a number to that. You said we're on the computer. The average employee is spending 62% of their time in the browser, which is going to get to my next point here, Tim.
Awesome.
Tip number 2. The way that we do it is it's pretty simple, right? When we set out to build the technology a handful of years ago, it was really about where do employees spend their time? And I just kind of gave it away, right? 62% of the time is spent in the browser. So what we do is we push out agent via RMM. It's actually kind of nice how it works. There's an agent that sits down on the device that says, I'll use you as an example here, Jesse. It says, you are Jesse Miller. You're logged in. If you're on a Windows device, your user principal name tells me you are Jesse Miller. And I know that as a matter of fact when I go to do my reporting. And then we have a browser extension that gets put on the device via policy. And there's actually a stream of communication going between these things. And the browser extension is watching Jesse, the user, log into web application. So if Jesse, the user, logs into Trello with J Miller at powerpsaconsulting.com, we now know that Jesse, the user, is using this account to log into this application.
Right.
We then integrate in with the IDP and we look for those matching events. So we see, oh, Jesse Miller logged in. He didn't really use his IDP. Here's a way he accessed outside of IDP. And then we can start to map all those details. So if you think about it, we really just, I got you here, Tim, just let me get one last thing. Just think about how a password manager prompts. That was the eureka moment for me, right? Like every time you're logging into something, those same events we're taking or trailing or storing for account inventory and software inventory, we're just using it for a compliance perspective.
So for those in the back, IDP, one of the things that we do here is make sure we qualify our acronyms. So John, IDP?
Yes, your identity provider. Think about Microsoft, Google, if you're using Okta, any identity access method, or if you're thinking about the way you do your job day to day, sign in with Amazon, sign in with Facebook, sign in with Apple. All of those would be your identity providers that you can access it, your tool.
Coming from the acronym guy that's highly dyslexic, that screws them up 90% of the time. Anyways, I like to make sure we always qualify and quantify acronyms. So, my goodness, we are halfway through. Where are we going next, Mr. Tim?
So there's another interesting aspect here. This is just a tangent, but I worked at a company, big consulting firm. The other thing is licenses, right? Like, so we would get paid to come into a big company and be like, you're paying for 1,000 licenses, but you're only using 500, right? We'll save you $5 million a year, right? So like a lot of that is like there's shadow IT, then there's I guess almost the opposite, right? Like there's good to be gained in the fact that you're not using something you're paying for. And as you said, 62% of the time on the browser, like you start to get a lot of insights as well on like what tools or licenses am I paying for that I'm not actually using. This has gone into like some of these services now. My wife was just talking about it. Like, there's services like enter your login for Netflix and all this stuff, and you'll figure out like all the stuff you're not using. So there's a business in that as well. So like, as you said, these insights go both ways, the things that you're using that you're not permitted to use and the things that you should be using that you're not using, but you're paying for. So let's
face it. How many of us paid for a gym membership all through COVID and never went? Okay. Right?
It's a personal call out, Tim. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Right? How many of us forgot to cancel our gym memberships during COVID and still get charged month after month after month, even though the business doors were closed?
Speaking of which, I just reminded me I got to cancel my Beachbody subscription that I've had for like 2 years.
Have you been watching Physical on Apple TV? Body by Sheila, right? Anyway, I digress. So, but yeah, I mean, I think Tim, you make a really good point, right? So, being able to understand, okay, it is an approved app. It is something that we want to use and take advantage of. And we roll it out, but the adoption isn't there. And we're paying for way more than we need to. And the adoption's not there, right? So now we have a different problem. We have a tool that's approved. We bought a bucket of seats. They're not being consumed, so we're wasting money. And why is it not being adopted? That's a whole nother can of worms, right? And I believe I keep seeing the hand freeze up over there. Tell me, Mr. John.
I just want to back it up with some data here because Tim, when I originally went out to solve this problem, that's the problem I thought mattered, by the way, the real issue. And what blows my mind, 25%. This is a Gartner metric. It's either Gartner or Forrester, but it's a really well validated metric out there of SaaS licenses go to waste. So if you take the $138 billion US SaaS market, 33.5 of it, $33 billion of valuation is just wrapped up in what we call orphaned licenses, underutilized licenses, over provision licenses. There's lots of different ways you can look at that same issue. Now, I know a lot of our audience here is MSP. I will put in an air of caution here. It's a long battle to save not a lot of revenue for your end client down this journey. I mean, key applications, you take an AutoCAD or Adobe or a Salesforce or a Kronos or something that's not cheap. You bundle that in and you get there. But where we see it really is around those product adoption reports, at least in our system, is scheduling up a product adoption report. But we don't recommend the MSP on this. We recommend loading in the contract in our system and then sending the contract product adoption report to the CFO and letting that be the CFO's problem.
Yeah.
We have the data, like you can run a report. This is how many times they logged in. This is how much time they spent in it. But we don't recommend the MSP take that problem on, because it's going to be a lot of juice to squeeze for maybe a couple $100.
It does go back to, and I think we talked about this in the beginning, like what is our role as the MSP when it comes to software, both installed software and 62% of the SaaS apps that we spend our time on now. What is our role in that, right? You know, COVID, again, sort of shifted that whole cloud-based stuff now, right? Like SharePoint and Dropbox and, oh my gosh, I need to share this thing tomorrow, today with the client. I can't wait for IT to set up a drive and a SharePoint and permit. I know I'm going to put in Dropbox. And so what is the role of the MSP? I think, John, you just hit on one of them, like the adoption piece. Like, you're wasting money, not my problem. I'm just telling you about it.
Yeah, I think it's really going to be hard for this ever to become a fully managed component. The partners that I see that are really successful with it have a level of co-managed relationship where the CFO has access to their end, you know, a dual pane of glass where the CFO can go in and handle the data for what they care about. The CTO and the CIO and the CISO can log in for their technology layers, and the operating officers might have access to handle. But generally, the MSP is focused more on the software management. Back to where we talked about the compliance software inventory, the account inventory, building and maintaining the inventory, and providing the technology for the end layer to use. So in that case, Jesse, I know you're not looking for advice, but the way I'd say it is like allow that 10-user company with 50 SaaS apps the ability to do their own level of kind of SaaS license and provisioning management. And then you're providing that expertise, that strategy as an additional layer on top with conception of the whole IT layer. I wouldn't recommend pulling in 50 apps under your management.
Right.
You know that for sure. You'll never make money. You'll spend all day onboarding and offboarding people.
Yeah, and I think that's a great piece to segue back to what we were initially talking about, is where do we draw that line, and how do we not be the department of no, but rather the department of bro, for lack of a better word. But like bro, come on, bro. But using that to say, okay, hey, we have 50 SaaS, and that's what I was talking about with the graduated management tiers, right? Like, okay, yeah, we can manage all 50 for you. Here's what it's going to cost. We're happy to do it. Or you can make some decisions either to manage yourself, shrink that amount, you know, and we can help you with business process analysis to do some of that. And then, like you said, you're getting in front of the CTO, you're getting in front of the COO, you're getting in front of all the major players in the organization, getting face time and showing real value. And so I think that is where there's a huge amount of value that you can bring with this type of a service.
All right. One of us has a high-pitched squeal coming from their mic, and it ain't me.
It's probably somebody's running the vacuum. There's the painter is running the vacuum, and I think that's what it is outside my door. I'll mute.
Well, doesn't that just suck?
Yes, you said something important. You said something important, so I got to hit it. Sorry, I'll let us move from the subject from here.
Yes.
CEO, COO, CFO. You echoed what I said, but that is a lot of the magic of this sauce. When you're going to those QBRs, do you know how much they don't care about asset management, how much they really probably don't care about the amount of things your security tools blocked, or the amount of that stuff's like, I call it invisibleware. Like, it's obviously we as professionals know it's very valuable and very essential, but the CEO doesn't care about a lot of these invisible-wares. Now they do. CEO, COO, CFOs, C anything O, C. I mean, really every employee uses SaaS. And it's one of those things that universally, you don't need to educate somebody on the problems. Most people just, it clicks. They go, oh yeah, there is probably ways, because I don't cancel my Netflix or my gym membership. Oh yeah, there is data in there that probably shouldn't be in there because I've done it myself. I think that's one of the magic pieces of this thing, is that there's no role or responsibility that's impervious to shadow IT or for caring about SaaS.
Right.
So I don't know. I get excited because that's the part. That's the magic sauce.
Love it.
So
we had one a couple of weeks ago, right? Metrics that matter to non-technical business owners, and it's not easy, right? And like, we did a lot of surveys, and at least when it comes to security, I think what you're talking about, like, because you're talking about productivity and how people are doing their jobs, they get excited about. Security is like kind of a tough thing to prove value. So that was, that's a conversation we had before. We're going to revisit that at IT Nation as well, the gang here. So anyway, keep going, Tim.
So 15 minutes left or so. I'm going to open up another can of worms when it comes to shadow IT and the MSP, vendor due diligence. And so as an MSP, I do feel that part of our responsibility is, great, you just signed up with, some file sharing site, M-Files or Move It or whatever. And I think it's part of our responsibility to at least have some conceptual understanding of what is that vendor doing to protect the data. What is that like? Do they have not that I care about SOC 2? Are they FedRAMP? Okay, I'm going to say that. But what are we as the MSP? We're the professionals. So to be able to go to our client, Jesse, your client of 50 people, 50 apps, doing the diligence on them, like whether they're allowed or not, like I do feel like it's kind of our responsibility from a security expert to do something, to have something, some process, some vendor due diligence around it.
Yeah. The onus is higher, right? Like Tim, we don't want to talk about vendors, but Polygon or Cabello or whatever, right? Like, what data are we collecting as security vendors, and how well is it protected? And that's a question like MSPs should be asking every vendor. Right. What are your certifications, right? Like, where's your data parked? Is it in AWS? What region, right? Like, what level support? What level, as you said, AWS, FedRAMP, moderate, whatever. There's all different questions that have to happen, and the onus is so much higher on security vendors. And I'm sure the onus is pretty high on Auvik, right? Like that data still, the data you're taking is not necessarily like health data, but it's certainly, it gives you an understanding of like a competitor or whatnot. I mean, I don't know if people ransomware your SaaS metadata, but
So John, I see you wanted to chime in here. Like, so when we think about VDD, vendor due diligence, like, and the ownership of vetting products for our clients, like Tim or John or Jesse, thoughts?
I see Jesse keeps unmuting. Did you have some input there? I have an opinion, but
no, John, go ahead. I want to hear you. Kick us off.
Yeah. So when it comes to like VSPM, so vendor security posture management, or Tim, VDD, vendor due diligence, I think I'm going to lean back into my answer from earlier. It's a little bit of a co-managed relationship. Where does the MSP start and stop, though? I think it's critical the MSP is educating here. You're not going to stop Susie in finance, or let's go back to our intake scenario earlier. You're not going to stop that team of people unless you blackwall their entire organization from doing anything. You're not going to stop those behaviors. Like, think about it. The worst example of shadow IT in the world is like Google Forms, because it actually probably looks like normal sanctioned IT. If I go to my forms.google, and if I just go IP block Google, my company's going to have a riot. If I go block Google Forms, my company's going to have a riot. But I can start to ask for all sort of sensitive data, and it looks like sanctioned IT. So I think the importance here is about educating the risks of shadow IT with the team. And that starts with the beginning of the client journey. So that's why I think shadow IT scans are a critical part of the client onboard, because you've got to establish there's these problems, and then you blend it into that QBR. Then you go, okay, now we're going to work on you on a regular cadence to resolve these shadow IT problems. And then as you start to get into these shadow IT assets, you can expose issues like VSPM, where you could start to say, well, Miro, a lot of its development toolkits come out of like Russian-backed development teams or something like that. And, not knocking Miro or anything in specific, but like that's where you start to bring up those kind of insights with your customer. But that's a tough pickle. Like, I don't think, I think the MSP has to educate, and they have to establish a cadence of shadow IT and process around it. But frankly, short of blacklisting every IP and every domain name, you're not going to stop it. You just have to educate it. It's kind of like security awareness training. You're not going to stop it unless you start building education around it.
Jesse? No? Before I chime in?
Go.
So, you know, I'm the process guy. You know that I'm the policy procedure guy. Like, one of the things when we look at CIS, for example, and we look at the asset management components of CIS, whether it's hardware or in this case, software, right? There's a huge gap, and I'm going to plug myself because I'm pretty excited about this new thing that we're doing, right? There's a huge gap in being able to both hardware, software, and SaaS take those lists, review that data, present it to our client, and get them to sign off and acknowledge and accept. This is our hardware list. This is our software list. This is our SaaS list. I mean, right now, when you look at the space, it's I download a spreadsheet. No. We have completely automated that. We're pretty excited. Like, we're bringing Auvik into this fold at some point here in the coming weeks, hopefully by IT Nation, but we're bringing Auvik into that fold where you can completely automate the governing aspect of hardware, software, Microsoft, anything in the Microsoft Graph ecosystem, and soon to be Auvik SaaS management. So as a bigger picture, right now, today, at least put this conversation in your QBR. At least get that in front of your client. Whether or not you bring it on our tool, or you bring in Auvik, or you hire somebody as smart as Jesse, or do data discovery with Tim at Cavello, start to have that conversation with your client and letting them know, like, people are signing up for stuff and it's kind of weird. And just bring that. And once you start to operationalize your MSP, Jesse can help you with that. Once you start to grab the data from Cavello, once you understand the SaaS products that are there from Auvik, and you can get them fully governed by us, you can operationalize that within your MSP. But at the bare minimum, take IG1, hardware asset management. Take IG2, software asset management, and at least do something with your client on a regular cadence. And by the way, CIS is you should do that monthly.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that you mentioned, and kind of blending all of those different tools into an offering. When you have, as regulations become more commonplace for more businesses, it used to be, okay, well, we're an MSP, we don't really have to deal, our clients don't have regulations. Well, almost those days are a bit kind of gone, and we're at a tipping point where the majority of businesses are going to be regulated. And so I think being able to know where your data is, and again, then having a footprint that maps that to what applications you're using, so you can see, hey, I have 50 apps, right? But maybe only 10 of those have sensitive data, so I need to focus on those. And that helps you price better and be more competitive in the marketplace.
Good points, really good points. So we're coming up on the last 7 minutes, Mr. Tim. I see you waving your hand.
Yeah, so I mean, we talk about turning up the dial, right? Like, so there's no on everything, and then there's yes on everything. And Jesse just said, like, that's starting to creep over to the no over here. So if you don't have visibility, you can't have the no on some things and yes on some things, which which is awesome. Which John's built something that provides that. We talked about that. I think we had an allow list vendor on in the past, and we talked about, like, if you just turn that thing on, you're going to be fired in 10 minutes. Yep. So it's turning that dial up slowly, having that visibility to at least have a conversation. So, sorry.
I mean, how many times have you gotten in the car after your kids have been in there cranking their rap music, and you get in, you start the car, and your ears blow out, right? That's because they cranked the volume. No. Us as MSPs, we're classy kind of people. We want to gradually raise that volume level of our AC/DC or our Metallica or whatever genre it is you like to listen to. We don't want it blaring instantly in our face. And that's where, when I think John, forgive me if I'm wrong, there are ways to softly roll these things out so it's not full bore, full blast.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You have to understand, though, to get started. Right. I think that's to Tim's point. The other Tim S's point. It's you have to understand, and you have to go and strategically go to the customer, because again, even if you run Avik SaaS management in your environment and you get this whole list, I always say shadow IT is not bad, but it's also not good. Like, it is in its state neutral. There's it has no opinion. It has no intentions. It just is. And so if you just run ASM and then you go whitelist everything, you're not doing anything for your client because you're allowing all the shadow IT. If you don't run ASM and then you go whitelist only certain apps, you're going to be fired. So it's a magic about like going in and strategically taking that list, working against it, and then slowly introducing controls around it to prevent these, like you said, popping your eardrums out when you jump in the car or never hearing any of the music at all. I don't know. I tried to make that one work.
Yeah. So Jesse, what's your first step with your client that has 50 SaaS products?
Yeah, I think it is sitting down and creating a criticality list. So I kind of alluded to it in the fact of that, hey, you need to know all what you have. Then we need to define where is critical data being stored. Then is there duplication in any of the applications? And then what can we get rid of? And maybe it's nothing, but at least understanding where we're at and beginning to, from that point forward, make more informed decisions, and then continuing to review that list and potentially have things fall off as we move forward in this new world.
Gotcha. And then Mr. Tim.
You're catching me here for final thoughts. I think we're running up against the clock.
We are.
No, I think it's that slow turning the dial up, but visibility and insights trump anything. And I know trump's a bad word now, but I still don't have another word for it. But
well, it does live in the shadows, right?
Right, and I think MSPs, the more insights they deploy, the more conversations they can have that talk about real business problems or real business solutions. So this is awesome, John. Thanks for a great hour.
Yeah. I guess I'll leave my final thought here, right? So this is very much, you have to be very passionate about this problem to have a saying like this. I say that like at the heart of every SaaS tool is business data, and every SaaS tool is half business problem and half IT problem. And quite frankly, like that is the holy mecca of an MSP, solving business data problems through IT layers and business layers. That's why I'm just so passionate about the issue with SaaS, because fundamentally that's the space that there's just so much opportunity to have great conversations with your client about. And awesome. I'll leave it there. I could go for hours.
I know you could. And John, and obviously Jesse, final words, parting gifts.
Parting gifts. Yeah, I would say we come full circle to say you have to know what you have before you can do anything about it. And I think that's where we got to start.
Good stuff. And obviously I get to say something. I don't know. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, but I will. Anyways, I say it every week. Start someplace, do something, start somewhere, take that first step, whether you go on and you grab and sign up with Avik, whether you bring Jesse in to try to help you operationalize your CISO program, whether you grab Cavello and start discovering that data, or you work with us to build out probably the first thing, which is policies and procedures around the how and the why. Do something. Start somewhere. Like, pick a thing, take a half hour a week, put it on your calendar, and start someplace. Do something today. So what's coming up next week, Tim? I am next week. Is it next week? I'm not here. I think it's next week. I'm not here.
Not on the week after that. So hiring and attaining and attracting cyber talent, which is harder than IT talent right now. But Josh Mason, Heather Noggle, Cody Stack. Yeah.
So for those of us that are here, we thank you so much. John, if you want to drop your link, is it just avik.com? Is it I want 3SaaS.com. Is it protectmysaaS.com? What is it?
It is. I'm going to put it in chat here. I'm not connected. If you maybe don't mind sharing somebody who's connected in the chat, but it's just going to avic.com and jumping into our SaaS management product and clicking into that product. That's where you can learn a little bit more.
Nice.
Awesome.
And for those of
CAS
for those
1 and 2, right, Tim? There's a reason why it's CAS Control 1 and 2, right? They're in order. So
yeah,
top of the order there for John Harden. Yeah.
Top of the order and top of the order for whatever. We're not going to. So 3:00. Our time is up. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy. Oh wait, I gotta say one thing. We just had a holiday weekend, and I didn't hear of any major cyber events. I might knock wood, right? A Monday holiday and not a major SolarWinds or something else happened, right? So hopefully we'll be going into the next couple of holiday seasons a little less, but always going to be prepared. So pretty excited for next week about the talent pool, and this will end your podcast. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
See you, everyone.
Cheers.